not necessarily, but I certainly don't want to.
I'm not counting on it, John. I'm just dealing with it the way it is. Is there somebody sitting there? No, that's my bag, my dinner. Join me. All right. We do bubbles together. We're sending bubbles. You're sending bubbles together. Yeah, you can get bubbles lady. Oh, hi guys. Hi, Joyce and Daryl.
Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Sorry, hello. Shabbat Shalom, Julia. Hi. Fellows.
Hi, Rabbi. Love your dress. It's very summery.
Oh, I see. You disappeared. You disappeared.
I didn't know that.
What's wrong
Not
with
that I wear
you?
green.
Well, no.
You have a green screen behind you. That's when I have this picture of the sanctuary behind me. But if you're wearing
you
green,
blend into it.
you would just see a floating head.
We come to Rome's occasionally.
I would never have thought of that.
Oh, that's pretty.
Okay.
Joyce, you dropped your shell.
Actually, I wasn't even wearing.
I know, I brought one too. The same
Yeah, I
reason.
don't. I have to walk back up there. We'll just be getting cooler because it's going to be almost getting dark. Fewer people all the time, huh?
Yeah.
We figured it's Labor Day weekend this weekend, right? So I bet a lot of people are doing a travel weekend.
That's what we
Yeah.
thought.
Oh, that's right. This is
Yeah.
long weekend.
Really?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
probably
100%.
Yeah.
That's the last thing I want to do.
I'm traveling too.
We were
Between here and
supposed to.
Richmond.
We were supposed
Between
to.
here and Richmond, that's a long trip.
Yeah.
And home. If you be
We're supposed to go to Harrison, but then I just got a message that the Airbnb requested that we don't do it this weekend. I don't know why, but anything where they're like, please don't come, I'm like, not coming.
No.
Yes, because it could be any number of reasons. But that's never happened to me before, where the host asked to cancel.
was somebody there that,
I wonder if it was COVID related, and that's what I'm thinking in my head.
whatever it was.
Yeah. So now we're just gonna go. My husband and I have never been to the Sea to Sky gondola, so we're gonna do a day trip to that. So make a little bit of the weekend.
That'll be good.
Put my telescope. Mind you, it's warm.
I'm just right. I'm not cold.
And she said, not only that, but
And you let me know about people coming down from Friday. This is the first time I just want people need a little more space. I just, so I was like, because you're trying to really make sure that we could feel everything fit for all these people. But it's more people actually can right, exactly. Yeah. You need to, you get working.
Are we good, Mario?
Oh, yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
Great to see you all. We just told some of you on the way in, we just had a flat tire on the way to temple. And I'm feeling the I need Shabbat to relax. And I'm so grateful to be here and to see all of you and be here together. So let's begin with song.
הנה מה טוב ומנעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב ומנעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב, שבת אחים גם יחד. We'll continue. Let's do Maya Fehayom right below Hine Matov, page 128. Maya Fehayom, Shabbat Shalom. Maya Fehayom, Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom.
As we begin our Kabbalat Shabbat, as we welcome this evening on page 131, we'll sing together Shiru Ladonai Shir Chadash. We sing unto God a new song.
Shiru Ladonai Shir Chadash, Shiru Ladonai Kol Haaretz, Shiru Ladonai Baruchu Shemo, Basru miyom liyom Yeshuato, Sapru v'goyim kevodo, V'chol ha'amim nifleotav, Ki gadol Adonai, Umhul al-meod, Norahu, al kol Elohim, ay, 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 yadai, 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 yadai,
So we'll welcome the Shabbat angels who are with us on Shabbat. Shalom Aleichem, page 142.
Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharei, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei Amlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Bachem l'shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Barchuni l'shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Zeichem l'shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Turn back now to page 138. So we welcome the Sabbath bride L'Chadod.
Lecha Dodi likrat kala b'nei Shabbat nekabla Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad Yishmianu el hamyuchad Adonai echad Ushmo echad l'shemo tiferet Letehila lecha Dodi likrat כי מקור הברכה מראש מקדם נסוכה סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה לך דודי לקראת כלה בני שבת נקבלה מקדש מלך עיר מלוכה קומיצי מתוך אפיך רב לך שבט ועמק בך והוא יחמו עלייך חמלה לך דודי לקראת כלה בני שבת נקבלה התעוררי התעוררי כי באורך קומי אורי 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 שיר דברי כבוד אדוני עלייך נגלה לך דודי לקראת כלה בני שבת נקבלה בואי ושלום עטרת בעלה גם בשמחה ובצהלה תוך אמוני עם סגולה בואי חלה לך דודי לקראת כלה בני שבת נקבלה.
You may be seated. And as we prepare to bring in the light of Shabbat, Yael, do you want to help light the Shabbat candles?
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat.
Now prepare as we transition into this next part of our service. We'll turn ahead to page 263 and rise together. We'll face toward the east this way for Chatzi Kaddish.
Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbi v'amad yivrachute v'yamlich malchute v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayedechon et Yisrael Bagala u'b'izman karim v'yimeru Amen. Yeheshmei Rabba mevarach le'alam olam me'amaya Yisrael Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yipar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal Shemei d'kudesha b'rihu le'ela min kol berchata v'shirata Tush v'chata v'nechemata Damiram ve'alma ve'imeru Amen. Baruchu et Adonai HaMevorach Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam va'ed.
Seated. So I understand understand that our Shabbat service is competing with a hockey game on the street.
Very exciting.
Very exciting, go Canucks. And in our neighborhood, as I know in some neighborhoods around, I've seen on the news, some of our neighbors have been watching outside the games, and our neighbors who we're friendly with a few doors down, I've seen them gathered around their television outside, and they keep saying, hockey in September. In September, it's so strange. And it's like the thing is in its wrong season, right? And I think about, when we pray at this part of our service, Ma'ariv Aravim, we talk about day turning to night and night to day and the seasons and their time, and this whole flow of time and the calendar is such a part of what it means to be Jewish, that we're very sensitive to that. And I think, sometimes as now we're approaching the high holidays, sometimes people say the holidays are so late this year, the holidays are so early this year, but really they're not. I mean, they happen in their time. And our calendar does this amazing thing where we have this very strange leap month system in the Jewish calendar, that every so often we get an extra month in Adar in the spring, so that the holidays do stay in their time. So we don't get Rosh Hashanah in the winter or Purim in July, but we have the seasons in their time. Though we can adjust the hockey schedule, there's something about the Jewish calendar that we kind of acknowledge the time and place for everything. So let's read together on 265. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bidvaro ma'ariv aravim, v'chochma potech she'arim, u'bitbuna meshane iti, u'machalif et hazmanim, מסדר את הכוכבים במשמרותיהם ברקיע כרצונו. בורא יום ולילה, גולל אור מפני חושך וחושך מפני אור. מעביר יום ומביא לילה, ומבדיל בין יום ובין לילה, אדוני צבאות שמו. אל חי וקיים תמיד ימלוך עלינו לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני, המעריב הרבים.
אהבת עולם בית ישראל, עמך אהבת, תורה ומצוות, חוקים ומשפטים, אותנו לימדת. על כן אדוני אלוהינו, בשוכבנו ובקומנו, נשיח בחוקך, ונשמח בדברי תורתך ובמצוותיך לעולם לעולם ועד. כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו, ובהם נגע יומם ולילה. ואהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים. Baruch atah Adonai, Ohev Amo Yisrael, Ohev Amo Yisrael. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavecha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'odecha. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברתם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם להוד על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם al mezuzot beitecha uvisharecha. Leman tizkeru v'asitem v'kol mitzvotai v'tem kedoshim le'Elohechem. Ani Adonai Elohechem asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim liot lachem le'Elohim. Ani Adonai Elohechem.
Join now on page 270 in our Song of Redemption, Mi Chamocha.
Mi chamocha belim Adonai, mi chamocha nedar b'kodesh. Nora tehilot osei pele, nora tehilot osei pele. Machotecha ra'uvanecha, bolkei hayam lifnei Moshe u'Miriam, ze'elianu ve'amru, Adonai yimloch, Adonai yimloch, le'olam va'ed. V'ne'emar, kipad Adonai et Yaakov, u'galo mi'ad chazak mimenu, Baruch atah Adonai, Gal Yisrael.
I feel like we have incredible visual examples right here of two different types of a sukkah. So we have an actual sukkah like we'd use for our holiday of Sukkot that's already been put up, not in its usual place. Usually it sits against this brick wall here, but back over there that we'll use on the holiday of Sukkot. And then we've got this incredible sukkah that is our shelter that Rabbi Dan and his sons Judah and Levi and Bernie put up this past weekend.
How come I didn't get to help?
I don't know, me neither. No, I saw pictures. Today is actually the first time I'm seeing it in person, and it's so big.
Yeah.
And it's amazing.
Lighting, way better
And with
than the
lighting. And I'm thinking about how many different ways this sukkah, this shelter, is going to shelter us over the next few months. And what an incredible blessing that is, that it's going to allow us to be together on Shabbats when it's not too cold, that it's going to allow, we're starting next Shabbat morning, next week on Shabbat mornings at 11 o'clock, our Tat Shabbat group that has, really formed such a beautiful community. They're going to actually meet out here and do Tat Shabbat on 11 o'clock every Shabbat morning with a net, and that our religious school is going to be able to function because of this sukkah, because of this shelter. The school might be curious how we're doing it. We're actually dividing the school in half, and half the students will come one week and the other half will come alternate weeks, so that we can cut down the numbers of people in the building. But there's so much that is much safer to do outside, like sing and have minyan and do all these different things. So because of this sukkah, we'll find shelter in that. And we think about all the different ways that we have shelter, both physical and metaphorical shelter in our lives, but for this one I'm especially grateful. So let's join together as we sing Hashki Venu about God's sheltering presence with us.
Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu L'shalom, L'shalom, V'hamidenu Shomreinu L'chaim, Ufros aleinu Sukkot Shlomecha, Ufros aleinu Sukkot Shlomecha. Amen. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu L'shalom, L'shalom, V'hamidenu Shomreinu L'chaim, Ufros Shabbat Shlomecha. Amen.
Continue page 272, Visham.
V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat לדורותם ברית עולם ביני ובין בני ישראל ביני ובין בני ישראל ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם Yambar Bambai, Shabbat, Shabbat, Yambar Bambai, Shabbat, Shabbat, Yambar Bambai, Shabbat, 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 Shalom. Kisheshet Yamim Asa Adonai et hashamayim ve'et haaretz ubayom hashvi'i Shabbat v'hinafash Yambar Bambai, Shabbat, Shabbat, Yambar Bambai, Shabbat, Shabbat, Yambar Bambai, Shabbat, 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 Shalom.
So we'll rise together now for the Amidah, face toward the east again, page 274.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu v'Elohei avoteinu v'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, v'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, v'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor, v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'Konei Hakol, V'Zocher Chasdei Avot v'Imahot, U'Mevi Geula Livnei B'neihem, Leman Shemo Be'ahava, Melech Ozer Moshiach Magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham, Ezrat Sarah. Atah Gibor Leolam Adonai, Mechaye Metim atah Rav Lehoshia, Morid Hatal, Mechalkel Chaim Bechesed, Mechaye Metim Berachamim Rabim, Somech Noflim Berofei Cholim, Umatir Asurim, Umekayem Emunato, Lishenei Afar, Michamocha Ba'al Gevur, Umidom Melach, Melech Memid Umechayeh, Umatzmiach Yeshua, V'ne'eman atah Chayot Meitim, Baruch atah Adonai, Mechayeh HaMeitim. Atah Kadosh v'Shimcha Kadosh, U'Kadoshim b'chayom Yalucha Selah, Baruch atah Adonai, Ha'el HaKadosh.
You are holy, your name is holy, and those who are holy praise you every day. Blessed are you, Adonai, the holy God. Baruch atah Adonai, Ha'el HaKadosh. Be seated. Join at the bottom of 277, 3 lines down, Kadshenu b'mitzvot.
Kadshenu b'mitzvotecha, v'ten chelkeinu b'toratecha. Kadshenu b'mitzvotecha, v'ten chelkeinu b'toratecha. Ay, 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 sabeinu mitubecha, v'samechenu b'shuatecha. Sabeinu mitubecha, v'samechenu b'yeshuatecha. Yadadai, 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 yadadai,
May these hours of rest and renewal open our hearts to joy and our minds to truth. May all who struggle find rest on this day. May all who suffer find solace. May all who hurt find healing on this day. May all who despair find purpose. May all who hunger find fulfillment on this day, and may we all live in such a way that this day fulfill its promise. Baruch atah Adonai, Mekadesh HaShabbat. 279.
Adonai Eloheinu be'amecha Yisrael u'tfilatam be'ahava tekabel u'tehila ratzon tamid avodat Yisrael.
Moment to just recall our week, about all of the encounters we had, the experiences that we endured, celebrated, all of the blessings that were part of our life in the past 7 days, so that Shabbat we can just pause and acknowledge them, that we can pray with a sense of fullness of heart, of gratitude. So we join together, page 281, Ve'al Kulam.
Ve'al Kulam, Yitbarach v'yitromam, Yitbarach v'yitromam, Shimcha Malkeinu, Tamid le'olam va'ed. Ve'al kulam, Yitbarach v'yitromam, Yitbarach v'yitromam, Shimcha Malkeinu, Tamid le'olam v'cholachem yoducha salah, v'halalu et shimcha b'emet, ha'el Yeshuateinu v'ezrateinu salah, Baruch atah Adonai, Hatov Shimcha, Hatov Shimcha, Ulecha, Ulecha Na'eh Lehodot.
I'm guessing that some of you, like me, were amazed looking at the pictures earlier in the week of the Israeli plane load arriving in the United Arab Emirates. It was quite an amazing sight to see this big plane with the words Shalom, peace, salam written on the side of the plane, and landing in Dubai. There was this long red carpet out, and then this large delegation, pretty much all men, leave that aside for a moment, but this delegation of these men in the traditional long white robes and standing and greeting all of these Israeli diplomats and journalists. And there was this moment of, well, that was easy. This peace that has been so difficult and elusive for such a long time, suddenly in a moment, at least here between these two countries that had no ties, no diplomatic relations, the sense of being enemies, were suddenly together, welcoming each other, inviting one another to come back and visit. No, you come back to Israel. And though it doesn't mean that there is, moment peace everywhere for Israel, there's still so much to cover and still so much that we still pray for and yearn for. But I think that sometimes we can get frustrated in the sense of how long will we pray for peace? It seems to always go on and on and on. And to have those moments, a glimmer of possibility and hope and just the potential of what might be that we saw this week is something we should just take a moment and celebrate and enjoy. So let us sing together our prayer of peace, Shalom Rav, on page 282.
Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Ki atah Melech Adon Lecho Shalom. Ki atah Melech Adon Lecho Shalom. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. V'tov b'necha levarech et amcha Yisrael b'chol עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Baruch atah Adonai Hamavarech et Amo Yisrael B'Shalom.
Take a moment for our own silent prayer.
Alleluia.
turn now to page 371 to offer Misha Berach, a prayer of healing. The long list right now for the Misha Berach. A lot of people in our community who are struggling, certainly of people we know very well at the shul and I know beyond. And so we hold them in our prayers this Shabbat, and we pray that they might find healing and comfort this time. Especially think of Jean Angus, Shane N., Roger Seelig, Sarah Chiachi, Helen Heacock Rivers, Zelda Bluma Shore, Mary Coheen, Bella Sherman, Kim Bennett, Yochana Bat Gershon Yosefa, Tony Kennedy, Sarah Bat Avraham Basara, Igor Ilyasov, Ed Ozer, Maury Dozer, David Shlomo Gorney, Denise Huguet, Ronnie Goldberg, Andrea Jarjbiek, Ari Schwartz, Maureen Newman, Neil Tapley, Ellen Barbary, and Yana Tinko. But if there are other names to add to our prayer of healing, we'd like to share them out loud at this time.
Donna and Edwards. John Slade.
Join together in the Misha Berach.
May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Misha Berach Imotenu Mekor HaBracha Le'avotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
So I want to share a few announcements before my drash. So most of them are high holiday related because it's the season right now. So a few things. So first of all, I hope that you've received our emails about what's happening for the high holidays. There's a lot going on. Much of it will be digital. Our services will be primarily streamed online. But there are lots of different ways to make your home service experience more meaningful and to also have some opportunities to connect more individually with us. So first of all, we've prepared this High Holy Days at Home kit that we hope that you will take part in for all of our temple members. You just need to sign up online, or you can phone the office to reserve one. It will come with a set of machzors, so both the Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur volume that you'll borrow for the high holidays, and then a bag full of a number of different items and goodies and things to help make your home both more festive, but also feel a little bit more sacred, to help turn your home into a space for prayer as well. We are doing a Slichot program I want to mention on next Saturday night, September 12th is Slichot. Traditionally, Slichot is the service when we really kind of usher in the melodies and the feeling and the ambiance of the holy days. And so we are actually participating in across Canada Slichot program and service with most of the Reformed congregations within Canada. We will be doing part of it a little bit different because we're Vancouver and we have to do it a little bit different and because of the time difference. So there's going to be a lecture with one of my teachers who's terrific. His name is Rabbi Dr. Larry Hoffman. He's just retired, but he's probably the expert within the Reform movement on liturgy. So he's going to be doing a talk about the Unatana Tokef during this year, the who shall live and who shall die, and the power of it, and especially in this time. We are going to watch a little bit of a delayed version of his talk. So it's going to be at 8 p.m. here, our time. And then we are going to have our own Temple Sholom discussion groups. So we'll be able on Zoom to have kind of smaller, intimate discussion groups to talk and also be with one another. Should be great. And then it will be followed by a Slichot service, which was put together by all of the clergy of the Canadian Reformed congregations. So you'll see some familiar faces, and it'd be nice to get that connection between our other sister congregations in Canada. The other thing, a few things I just want to point out about preparing for the holidays and signing up for things. The one in-person experience we are going to have is Tashlich. So Tashlich, many of you I know participated in the past, where we go down to the water. Temple Sholom, we always do it at Kids Beach, and we cast breadcrumbs into the water, symbolic of casting away our sins or the things we want to let go of in the new year. So we're going to be doing Tashlich in person, and we anticipate there will be a lot of people who want to do that because it's outdoors and we can see each other. So we're going to be doing it in shifts, but you do need to pre-register because we need to remain under the threshold of people that can gather in a group. So do sign up for that, and it will be followed, as it usually is, with a catered picnic meal by Lazy Gourmet. So you can stay in Kids Beach Park, don't have to cook, and have a nice picnic with your temple friends. That's all I wanted to announce. Anything else? Okay. So sign up, yes. So I think by now I'm pretty fluent in Canadian English. Pretty fluent, I am.
Good for you.
But there's one word at this time of year, at back to school time, that always makes me giggle because I never heard this word before I moved here.
What is it?
Duotang.
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 Really?
It's not an American word.
Not an English word either.
No, it's
Not an, it's just Canadian?
No, it's only Canadian, yes.
Okay, it's a very funny sounding word. It is. If you didn't grow up here, it seems funny. A duotang. But I'm starting to get used to it. Now,
Didn't even know.
a duotang is like the folder that's kind of like a thicker paper on the outside, and it folds over, and you've got the little foldy prongs inside of it. It's like a report cover kind of thing. That's what I would call it.
All the schools use them here.
What do you call it?
Like a duotang.
Like a duotang. I
What
don't
else
know. What I
would-
call it, a report cover. We didn't use them for
Oh.
like everyday school use.
Wow.
So there
I
you
don't know any
go.
other word for it.
Now,
Is it traffic keepers?
a duotang will come back in a moment.
Traffic keeper.
So in this week's parasha, which is Kitavo, the Israelites are instructed to mark their settlement in the land of Israel. They're getting ready to enter the land with this construction project. That they're going to gather these big rocks and plaster them white and put the words of God upon the stones. And the instruction in the parasha says, "You shall write upon the stones all of the words of this law very clearly." Write them very clearly. But what's really interesting is the way in which they were translated into Aramaic. Now you have to remember, Aramaic was the language that most Jews of antiquity spoke. And when the Torah and the whole Hebrew Bible was first written down and transcribed and passed around, it always came with a translation. It came with an Aramaic translation so people would understand the Hebrew, because not everyone spoke Hebrew. And in Aramaic, the words very clearly, written very clearly on these stones, come from the Hebrew, meaning carve it well or do it with detail. But the Aramaic translator said this: "You shall write upon the stones all of the words of this law in writing deep and plain, to be read well and be translated in 70 tongues." Very interesting. They understood that these big stones needed to have translation. Translation is a very interesting topic when we think about Judaism and what Hebrew means to us in Jewish life. We kind of even take it a bit farther when we think about transliteration and having the phonetics in our prayer book. There's so many interesting things to think about when we are thinking about translation, and how does it work, and does it make sense to the people who are experiencing Judaism if it's not translated. Now, our Reform movement has been kind of at the forefront of this. The Reform movement, when it started in Germany in the 1800s, put the siddur into German, into the vernacular. It was a very kind of controversial thing, but it was at the heart of what the early Reform rabbis thought was important. That we had to understand what we were saying in order for it to feel authentic. But it wasn't the 19th century rabbis in Germany that were the first to think of this. And obviously we know that these Aramaic-speaking Jews were thinking about it a lot. And there's a dispute in the Talmud about the Shema. Can the Shema be recited in another language? I mean, we could say, some other parts of Torah, sure, you could translate it and understand it, but the Shema is so sacred and central. Can we do that? So there's a debate, as there always is in the Talmud. Rabbi Yehuda says one must recite the Shema in the original Hebrew, as written in the Torah. But the majority of the rabbis say you can recite it in whatever language you understand. And that is the halakha, that is the way the law goes. That one may recite the Shema in their own language, provided that you recite the words clearly and articulately. Now, over the years, the role of Hebrew in the Jewish world and in our own worship has been really something that has kind of ebbed and flowed. I'm actually curious, how many of you here grew up in a Reformed synagogue? Just a few. A little bit. So the Reformed synagogues of 30, 40, certainly 50, 60 years ago would have had far less Hebrew than you would experience at Temple Sholom. And even within Temple Sholom, from what I know of the history of our synagogue, that the early years of Temple Sholom had really very little Hebrew compared to what we do today. So there's been this shift of the pendulum. And I have to say, I love it. I'm a big fan of the Hebrew language. I think that I really remain an advocate of learning Hebrew, that there's something about, that gets lost in translation. But there is value that cannot be dismissed in understanding. That we really have to understand what is going on for it to be meaningful. Later in the parasha, we have a really wonderful teaching about this idea. There's a description of what happened when our ancestors would bring their first fruits to the priest in the temple in Jerusalem as an offering. That they were instructed on Shavuot to bring these first fruits as an offering, and that they had to recite a formula to hand it over to the priest. It's actually a very well-known formula because it's in the Passover Haggadah. It's Arami Oved Avi, my father was a wandering Aramean. That comes from this week's parashah. So the rabbis talk about the details of how this ritual worked in antiquity. That the Israelite would come with the basket on his shoulder and recite, "My father was a wandering Aramean," and he'd take the basket and place it in the priest's hand, and he would wave it, and then he would recite this long, long passage. The Mishnah says, it used to be that everyone would bring their basket and they would recite this long passage. And the people who couldn't do it, meaning the people who didn't know Hebrew, would repeat the words word for word after the priest. But soon, the people stopped bringing their offerings. And it was decided that those who could and those who could not understand should repeat the words after the priest. That people were being embarrassed, perhaps, feeling insecure, and were no longer living their Jewish ritual because they felt like they couldn't have access, or that maybe they weren't worthy of having that access. I like teaching this text about flexibility and change in Judaism, the value of protecting the dignity of every person. But I think that there is something here too about language. Hebrew was inaccessible to the Aramaic-speaking Jew who would come to the temple with an offering. And it's interesting that the Mishnah does not say that he would recite the formula in translation, not in Aramaic, but that simply that they would repeat after the priest. So here the Hebrew was maintained and upheld. There is value to the rhythms and the sounds of the language, even without total comprehension. I think there's something so soothing about the melodies and the words of the prayer. There is sacredness in this Lashon HaKodesh, the holy tongue. I love the Hebrew language. I love its flow, its sound, its nuance and mystery. I love being able to speak with Jews from Russia and Morocco and Ethiopia in this ancient language that we share. I love seeing the letters dance on the page of the siddur, or in the Sefer Torah, or in my child's duotang from Vancouver Talmud Torah. Judaism without Hebrew is rootless, and Judaism without understanding is meaningless. So Kitavo, I think, helps us remember the value of both. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
So I will invite you now to turn in your siddur to page 586. We will rise and face east for Aleinu.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, l'tekru l'yotzer breishit, shelo asanu kegoyei ha'aratzot, v'lo samanu k'mishpachot ha'adama, shelo sam chalkenu kahem, v'gor aleinu k'chol hamonam, v'anachnu korim, u'mishtachavim u'modim, לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא נוטה שמיים ועושה לארץ, ומשה יקרו בשמיים עמו, ושכינתו זו, וגובה מרומים, הוא אלוהינו עינות, אמת מלכנו אפסולתו, ככתוב בתורתו, וידעת היום השבות אל לבבך, כי אדוני הוא אלוהים בשמיים עמו, והארץ
595, a reading before Kaddish. There are stars up above, so far away we only see their light, long, long after the star itself is gone. And so it is with people that we loved. Their memories keep shining ever brightly, though their time with us is done. But the stars that light up the darkest night, these are the lights that guide us. As we live our days, these are the ways we remember. Share the names of those whom we remember this Shabbat. I invite you, if I read the name of your loved one, to please stand as you honor their memory. We're in Shloshim for Billy Davids, Rabbi Shaya Kilimnik, and Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz. And we mark Yartzeit this week for Brenda Ankenman, Mayor Aronin, Claudia Tchaikovsky, Louis Harry Cohen, Amelia Devlin, Helen DeYoung, John Carling Fraser, Joseph Gordon, Elsie Herman, Kay Hill, Stephen Jaffe, Shelley Karp Zelsman, Tony Kahn, Benjamin Lane, Jack Mandelman, Leah Muchnick, Jack Posen, Ted Reback, Elsa Rosenberg, Ida Benenson Ruskin, Gershon Schaefer, Michael Schulman, Gordon Signer, Bertha Smolowitz, Walter Stern, Aaron Tenenbaum, Carol Tilbury, Michael Tinker, Sarah Trocki, Anna Van Vliet, Mary Voth, and Michael Werb. There are other names to mention. I invite you to rise and share them at this time. We now rise as one community congregation together as we join 598 in the words of Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabba, v'yalma dirach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon of yomechon v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael, v'agala v'zman kariv yimru amen. Yehi shmei Rabba v'rach le'olam olamei almaya, yitvarach v'yishtabach v'yipar v'yitronah v'yinaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleg v'yitalal shmei d'kudsha b'richu, Le'ela min kol yerchata v'shirata, tushbachata v'nechemata, ta'amiram be'alma v'imru amen. Yehi shalom rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mruma, hu yaseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru amen. Zichronam livracha, may their memories always be a blessing. Say together, amen. Later remain standing as we conclude with a Kiddush Motzi. If you want to follow along, it's on page 122.
Thank you, Hala.
Yes.
You don't want it. Okay.
Vayhi vayhi boker yom hashishi, vayachulu hashamayim v'haaretz, v'chol tzvaham, vayachal Elohim b'yom hashvi'i, malachto asher asa, vayishpot b'yom hashvi'i, mikol malachto asher asa. Vayavarech Elohim et yom hashvi'i, v'yakadesh oto, ki bo Shabbat mikol malachto, asher hara Elohim laso. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzah banu, Shabbat kodsho be'ahava u'b'ratzon hinchilanu zikaron l'maaseh Bereshit ki hu yom tehila l'mikra'ei kodesh zecher l'yetziat Mitzrayim ki banu v'acharta ve'otanu kidashta mikol ha'amim v'shabbat kodshecha ve'ahava u'b'ratzon inchaltanu Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh haShabbat. Amen.
So invite you, if you'd like to take one of your challah rolls, we'll join together in Hamotzi. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen. V'te'avon.
Oseh shalom bimromav, uyaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, ve'imru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, uyaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, ve'imru amen. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Thank you all for being here. If you brought a picnic and you want to stay, please do. If you're going elsewhere for Shabbat dinner, we'll just ask that you be careful as you exit to not bunch together. We're all glad you're here.
Shabbat shalom.
You're off?
Yeah.
You hang it in between your.
Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom.
Seems that way.
Anyway.
Right, every Sabbath.
Yes. Actually going home.
Are you?
You went to the island? Oh, wow. That's beautiful, isn't it? It really is.
Eating here?